Anti-immigration rallies are taking place in capital cities and regional centres across the country this afternoon.
3 protests, 1 marathon and the thin blue line stretched to the limit. Hundreds of police have managed to maintain relative order during rallies through the heart of Sydney, one led by members of a neo-Nazi organisation.
But first, tens of thousands of people marched in cities across Australia today to show their pride in Australia and to call for a stop to mass immigration.
You know, sometimes you feel it in the air. A shift, a growing unease. It's not just the cost of living or the endless political squabbles. It's something deeper, a sense that the very fabric of our society is changing and not always for the better. And this week, that feeling exploded onto the streets of Australia's major cities. Tens of thousands of ordinary Aussies from all walks of life took to the streets in what's being called the March for Australia protests. Their message was clear, direct, and for some, deeply uncomfortable. They want an end to mass immigration. They're saying enough is enough. And the reaction from the political class and mainstream media, predictable outrage, condemnation, and attempts to dismiss them as fringe elements. But when you have thousands of people, not just in one city, but across the country, marching peacefully, carrying Australian flags and voicing legitimate concerns, you have to ask, are they really just a fringe? Or are they the voice of a growing number of Australians who feel ignored, unheard, and increasingly displaced in their own country? This isn't about hate, mate. This is about a nation grappling with its identity, its resources, and its future. And it's a conversation we desperately need to have. Before we expose the real reasons behind the March for Australia protests and the inconvenient truths about mass immigration that mainstream media won't touch, join our Patreon. We're the resistance exposing the hidden agendas and the real impact of policies that are changing Australia forever. Link in the description. So let's talk about what actually happened. On August 31st, 2025, cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and even regional centres saw significant turnouts for the March for Australia rallies. These weren't just a few dozen angry blokes. We're talking about thousands upon thousands of ordinary Australians, families, tradies, retirees, students, all united by a common concern: the pace and scale of immigration. Their chants were direct: save the nation, stop the invasion. Their signs spoke of overcrowded infrastructure, housing unaffordability, strained public services, and a sense of cultural erosion. They weren't calling for an end to immigration entirely, but a significant reduction, a pause, a chance for Australia to catch its breath and for its infrastructure to catch up. What's fascinating is the immediate reaction from the political establishment. The centre-left government, predictably, condemned the rallies as spreading hate and tried to link them to neo-Nazi-linked elements.
Australia is a nation of foreigners, just like that wonderful song says. From all the lands on earth we come. And Australia isn't a place where we walk with Nazis. Australia is a place that went to war with Nazis.
This is the classic playbook, isn't it? When you can't address the legitimate concerns, you demonise the messengers. But it's getting harder and harder to dismiss tens of thousands of people as a fringe element, especially when polls consistently show that a significant portion of Australians, around half, believe immigration levels are too high. This isn't about racism, mate. This is about capacity. It's about the feeling that our cities are bursting at the seams, that our roads are gridlocked, that getting an appointment with a doctor is a nightmare, and that housing prices are utterly out of control. When you bring in hundreds of thousands of people every year without building the necessary infrastructure, without ensuring there are enough homes, schools and hospitals, you create immense pressure on the existing population, and that pressure eventually boils over. The March for Australia, was a raw, unfiltered expression of that boiling point. It was the silent majority, the everyday Aussies who are usually too busy working, raising families and paying taxes, finally finding their voice and saying, "We've had enough." Now, the argument for mass immigration always comes back to economics. The government and big business will tell you it's essential for economic growth, for filling skill shortages, and for boosting our GDP. And on paper, they're not entirely wrong. More people generally mean a bigger economy. But what kind of growth are we talking about? And at what cost to the average Australian?
The government's supposed to work for us, the people. We don't want half there not going on, so we're making a stand today to make things right. Albo, you work for us, mate, and you've got to go.
Economists often point to GDP growth, but that's a blunt instrument. What about GDP per capita? When you divide that growth by a rapidly expanding population, the picture often looks very different. For many Australians, their living standards are stagnating or even declining. Despite the overall growth figures, they're not feeling the benefits of this so-called economic boom, they're feeling the squeeze. Take housing, for example. While some argue that migration isn't solely to blame for rising house prices, studies have shown a clear link. An immigrant inflow of just 1% of a postcode's population can raise housing prices by around 0.9% per year. When you're bringing in hundreds of thousands, that adds up. It puts immense pressure on an already undersupplied market, making home ownership an impossible dream for many young Aussies. Then there's the impact on wages. While some argue that migration doesn't affect the wages of Australian-born workers, others contend that it can suppress wage growth in certain sectors, particularly lower-skilled jobs. It creates a larger pool of labour, which can reduce the bargaining power of existing workers. For many, it feels like a race to the bottom, where their wages aren't keeping pace with the soaring cost of living. And what about the infrastructure? Our roads are congested, public transport is stretched, and our hospitals are overflowing. The argument is that migrants contribute to the tax base, which funds infrastructure. But the reality is that the infrastructure often lags far behind the population growth, leading to a decline in quality of life for everyone. It's growth for growth's sake, without a clear plan for how that growth benefits the existing population. This isn't about being anti-immigrant, it's about being pro-Australian. It's about ensuring that our economic policies serve the interests of the people who already call this country home, and that any population growth is sustainable, planned, and genuinely benefits everyone, not just the big corporations who profit from cheap labour and endless demand. Beyond the economic arguments, there's a deeper, more subtle impact of mass immigration, the strain on our social fabric. Australia has always been a multicultural nation, and that's something to be proud of. But there's a difference between organic, well-integrated migration and rapid, large-scale population growth that can lead to social fragmentation. When communities grow too quickly without adequate time for integration and without shared values being reinforced, it can lead to division. We're seeing increasing reports of social tensions, of communities feeling overwhelmed, and a sense that the shared Australian identity is being diluted. The chant, "Save the nation, stop the invasion," might be inflammatory to some, but for others, it reflects a genuine fear that their way of life, their culture, and their sense of belonging are under threat. This isn't about blaming new arrivals. It's about the policies that create these conditions. When you have large groups of people arriving who don't integrate, who don't learn the language, or who hold values that are fundamentally at odds with Australian society, it creates friction. And that friction is felt most acutely in the working-class suburbs and regional towns that are often on the front lines of rapid demographic change. The government's response to these concerns is often to shut down debate, to label anyone who raises questions as racist or xenophobic.
We absolutely condemn the March for Australia rally that's going on today. It is not about increasing social harmony. We think, and I think the vast majority of Australians think that multiculturalism has been a good thing for our country.
But that only serves to deepen the division and push legitimate concerns underground. It creates an environment where people feel they can't speak openly, leading to resentment and a sense of being unheard. And that's a dangerous path for any society. For many Aussies, the March for Australia was also a protest against this silencing, against the political correctness that prevents an honest conversation about the challenges of rapid population change. It was a demand for open dialogue, for policies that prioritise social cohesion, and for a government that listens to the concerns of its own citizens, even when those concerns are uncomfortable. So if mass immigration is putting such a strain on our infrastructure, our housing and our social fabric, and if a significant portion of the population wants it reduced, why does the government continue to push for it? The answer, mate, lies in who truly benefits from this policy. It's not the average Aussie. It's big business who get access to cheaper labour and a constantly expanding consumer base. It's the property developers who profit from endless demand and soaring house prices. It's the universities who rely on international students for revenue. And it's the government itself who can point to headline GDP growth figures, even if that growth isn't translating into better living standards for its citizens. This is a political betrayal. Both major parties for decades have largely supported high immigration levels, often without a proper public debate or a clear plan for managing the consequences. They've been captured by powerful lobbying groups and economic interests that prioritise short-term growth over long-term national well-being. And when the public finally speaks up, as they did in the March for Australia protests, they're dismissed, demonised and ignored. It's a classic example of a political class that is out of touch with the concerns of its own people and more beholden to powerful vested interests. This isn't just about immigration numbers. It's about democratic accountability. It's about whether our elected representatives are truly serving the interests of the Australian people or whether they're simply managing the country for the benefit of a select few. The March for Australia was a powerful reminder that the people are watching and they're demanding answers. And if the politicians don't start listening, the next march might be even bigger. The mainstream media won't tell you the full truth about the March for Australia protests or the legitimate concerns of tens of thousands of Aussies about mass immigration. They won't expose the economic illusions, the strain on our social fabric, or the political betrayal that keeps these policies in place. Join our Patreon for uncensored investigations into the real impact of mass immigration and the hidden agendas that are changing Australia forever. This isn't just about numbers. It's about the future of our nation. It's about whether Australia remains a country where ordinary Aussies can thrive or whether it becomes an overcrowded, divided land where the dream is out of reach for most. To see the latest Australian crisis, click this video here.